Welcome. My name is Dr. Galena Bauer, and I'm the Associate Dean of the Pott College of Science, Engineering, and Education, and Professor in the Kinesiology and Sport Department. We're so glad that you're here today for the first Student Mental Health Panel sponsored by Active Minds and the Pott College ED. We also want to thank the Dean of Students Office, Center for Social Justice Education, the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning, CAPS, Department of Communications, Liberal Arts ED, and the Social Work Department for their support as well. This semester and even this past year has been an emotional one for so many of us on so many different levels. But it's not just us. Across the United States, 39% of students in college experience a significant mental health issue, such as anxiety disorders and depression. 67% of people ages 18 to 24 who suffer from anxiety and depression do not seek treatment. On top of that, suicide is the second leading cause of death of young adults, with mental illness being the top contributor. Some people refer to this generation as the anxious generation. What we cannot forget is that what is supposed to be an exciting time for students can also be one most daunting for those dealing with some type of mental illness. That's why we're having this panel. This student panel is set up to break down the stigma that surrounds mental health and the stigma surrounding people who seek out help for mental health related issues. It's time this topic stops being the elephant in the room. It's time that our USI community living with mental health issues know that they are not alone, and that telling someone about the darkness that they feel day in and day out is not a burden to others. And that cloud that follows you day by day is going to eventually be is temporary. It's going to be a ray of sunshine. What I'm trying to say is that silence hurts us all. And that is why I am so proud of all these students on this panel who are speaking up today. And I'm also glad that Brianna Stone, President of Active Minds, came into my office before classes even began, and we talked about having a panel. She, as I mentioned, is the president of Active Minds and the driving force behind this panel. Brianna Stone.
So I'm Brianna, president of Active Minds, just as Dr. Barr said. I'm also an elementary education major, and that's kind of shocking to most people because when you think of somebody who really cares about mental health, you usually think psychology, social work, all of those. But me as a future educator, my priority is to make sure that my future students know that they can talk to me about what they're feeling, no matter what it is, because these are big feelings. And when you're a small person, big feelings turn into big actions that turn into even bigger actions, and it's a snowball. So that's my goal with this organization, is to talk about it on the college level so that they can take it into their fields of choice and continue to talk about it because it matters everywhere. I'm excited that Dean Hammett is our moderator tonight. She'll be asking us a few questions, and then after each section, you all will get to ask questions and have this conversation.
You keep that one. Hi, people on the Zoom. Good evening. I want to thank you all for being here as well. We're going to hopefully have a great dialogue tonight, a conversation. If you have questions, we're going to take those as we go, because sometimes wait until the end, you forget your question. If you're like me, sometimes I hold on to my finger and I'm like, oh, I forgot it. So if you have questions, feel free to raise your hand. We'll take those as we go. I want to be conscious of the time that we have. I want to be cognizant of that. I want to make sure that as we kind of go along, if we need to move along, I will gently nudge if we need to move in that direction. I'm going to briefly point out who is who on the panel to you, and then they're each going to introduce themselves as well. But that way you at least know who we have. You've met Brianna. Next to her is Madison Gerbic. She is a sophomore, a junior biology major, born and raised in Evansville, native or two. Next to her is Stelton. She's a junior biochemistry major from Evansville, Indiana. Next to her is Kaylee. I told you I would do it, and I did. Kalia Smith, she's a sophomore psychology major, also from Evansville. And on the end, we have Georgia Sykes, who is a sophomore kinesiology major. Now, if y'all will pass the microphone down, tell us a little bit about why you're here and why you decided to be on the panel. You absolutely, if you want to recap, you can do that. And if you feel like you've covered it, then you can pass it along.
Well, I did want to mention, because I forgot to, because I did not prepare a statement, I'm leaving it. Outside on the table, we have a lot of Active Minds resources. American Foundation for Suicide Prevention also gives us a lot of resources that are out there. We are ending our program probably tonight for Post Secret U. If you want information, you can ask myself or Madison afterwards. But we have postcards out there if you want to submit one today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Madison Gerbig. I am a junior biology student here at USI, and I bring to the panel the perspective of someone dealing with intense anxiety while managing a loaded major, and also experiencing suicide of an immediate family member.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sarah Stelton. I am a biochemistry junior here at USI. And mostly tonight, I want to talk about the perspective of the friend of someone struggling with mental illness. And I have had a lot of experiences in my lifetime with immediate family members and some very close friends that struggle with anxiety, depression, eating disorders, and those things. And I want to just open that conversation a bit more tonight.
Hi everyone, my name is Kalia Smith and I am actually a sophomore in here at USI psychology major. I'm also the vice president of psychology club this year. Yeah, I never been a president of anything, so it's kind of cool, I guess. But anyway, so I'll be bringing to this panel my first experience of having family issues or family problems from home and dealing with that at school as well. And also I'll probably touch on some personal experience of like dealing with the death of a family member as well.
Hey guys, I'm Georgia. So I am a sophomore kinesiology major here at USI. Just switched majors, so definitely feeling a lot of stress trying to get everything in. So I'll be touching on that. But the main thing that I'm going to focus on tonight is the depression side of things. I've struggled with depression for a very long time, so hopefully I can just bring some insight into that and some coping things. Sort of.
I also wanted to mention, Erin, can I get you to stand up? Erin Pryor here is here tonight from the Counseling and Psychological Services area, also known as CAPS. If during the conversation, the dialogue, you start to struggle, you are wondering if maybe you could benefit from counseling services or something like that, we do have a room served across the hall. If you want to signal to me or come up and ask Erin if he could step outside for a second. If you have questions about counseling center hours and that kind of thing, I'll direct you to the website. But we do have someone here in case any of the things we talked about might become true. Okay? All right. Thank you. We're going to start. This is a great question. What do you wish you knew about your particular disorder before it set in?
So I found out that I had anxiety from a pretty young age. Just, it's not common to know it from a young age, but it's a common disorder. So I guess what I wish I would have known would be what it feels like. Because if you don't know what it feels like to have an anxiety attack at 11 years old, does not feel good. It feels like this is it. Like I can't breathe. This is how, like, this is not gonna go well. So I wish I would have known that that's what that was instead of, you know, the feelings that I was feeling.
What I wish I would have known about my anxiety disorder is that it's actually incredibly common. You know, in the very beginning, I felt like none of my friends or family really understood what I was going through. And through my own research and also some group therapy, I learned that that's not at all the case and that anxiety is actually very common.
Okay, I will say, this is from a friend who told me, the one thing that they wish that they knew about their eating disorder was that it was never about food, that it was and is always about control and seeking some sort of coping mechanism in their life, and that eating disorders can cloud a lot of your life.
So I don't really have a disorder, but I mean, it doesn't, I mean, I guess I did kind of have anxiety as a little kid just because of family issues though. And like, I don't know, because I kind of grew up a little poor when I was like from 5 to like 10 years old. So I guess that kind of sits in because I couldn't buy the name brands that I really wanted. And I kind of gave anxiety a little bit. People like kind of looked at me differently. Especially I was like the only Black female in like the entire high school. So it was a little in middle school. So it's a little struggle of being a person of color. So that kind of sits in with that. But I just kind of coped with it as making more friends and like, especially talking to your teachers. I mean, they may just be your teachers, they teach you things, but they can be really good with helping with their mental health, just walking into class, just to talk to them. That's my cooking.
So we'll touch on this more later, but I was diagnosed with depression my freshman year of high school. And I think before that, I just really wish that I had known that people care a lot. With depression, I'm sure some of you know that like you just have these immense feelings of like complete worthlessness and like no one cares and no one's there for you and you just feel like an absolute burden. And so I think that I wish I had known that like people are there for you and people do care about you and just reach out. Like no matter what happens, like there will always be someone around that wants to listen to what you have to say.
I'm gonna remind the panel, if we get to a question you don't want to answer, feel free to, pass along. I'm gonna say that as well. This one's kind of a follow-up. Who was the first person that you told that you were struggling and how did they react?
I told my dad, and I'm glad I did because he struggles with the exact same thing in nearly the exact same way. So that's how I found out, like, you need to go to see a doctor because they're gonna tell you that this is what's going on. And I know that because that's what I've experienced. So yeah, my dad, and he was very nice.
So for me, all of my family, I feel like could tell that something was wrong, because in particular, I had lost a bunch of weight where I didn't really look healthy. But aside from that, I did talk to my dad about it, and I typically go to him for serious things like that because he's very real with me and he doesn't sugarcoat, but he still knows what to say when I need it. And he helped me realize that I did need to get professional help. And he also gave me some de-stressing techniques that really helped as well.
I'll pass on this.
So my mom and my grandma actually were the first people I told that I didn't know what was wrong, I just knew something was wrong. And so I'm really glad I did. I personally have a very supportive home life, and depression is like, it runs on my mom's side of the family. So it was really good that I opened up to them because I did get that perspective of like, they knew how I was feeling and they were that much more supportive because of it.
So most of you gave a family member, I think. What's something that maybe a friend did that has been helpful to you during your illness?
So my best friend, who was actually just my maid of honor at my wedding, we haven't been friends very long, but I mean, obviously, like, anxiety is still a really big problem for me. I don't suffer from severe anxiety attacks as much anymore because I've learned how to cope with it. I've learned what I need to do. But just listening to me talk and telling me like, it's okay for you to feel that way, even when I feel like I'm being irrational. Just like, it's okay, like, you're okay to feel that way, that's fine. Just feel what you feel, let it go, and then work it out later.
So kind of similar to what Brianna was saying, my friends really helped reassure me and kind of just help me realize that I wasn't actually crazy for feeling the things that I did. And I had a tendency to catastrophize things a lot. So that essentially means blowing them up and making them seem way worse than they actually were. And my friends definitely helped me come back down to earth again and realize that it was okay and that I can manage what I'm dealing with.
So, I can speak to this from, the point of view of the friend, but one thing that I did with one of my friends was, she has, fairly severe, like, social anxiety, and so we, anytime we're out in like large crowds, that tends to be a trigger for her. And, so what we did one day was we sat down and we talked about all of the things that, really put her in that mode of like panic, and what really sets her anxiety off. And then she told me the things to look out for, things to know, like when she's having an anxiety attack or a panic attack. And so then in the future, whenever we were out in social situations, one of her coping mechanisms was to grab onto somebody to like kind of ground her. And so anytime I could tell that she was starting to get into that mode of panic, I would just grab onto her, like hold her hand or something like that. And she says that really helps her. So I think that really just being able to sit down and talk about the things that improve and cause anxiety and panic attacks and things was probably the best thing that we could have done.
So for friend wise, I'd probably say friends were like the best for me because I'm touching on the topic of family members and like the issues at home. And my family, they never really like talked about to each other about their mental health because we just weren't ever comfortable talking about that openly with each other. So that was kind of hard to like kind of open myself up to them, like mom, dad, and like everyone. So mainly my best friend, she was my coping mechanism. She came from a really good family. She just lived right down the road from me. So she always said to walk to her house if I'm ever feeling like I need to get out, which I did a lot. So I feel like just making a really good friend at school and having them as your like person to hold on to, I feel like that's like a good way to like, you know, get away from what you're feeling.
So personally, one of my coping mechanisms, I isolate a lot. When I start feeling myself going to like a depressive episode, I will just like, I don't want to say cut everyone off, but cut everyone off. Like I will just completely isolate myself. And so one of my best friends from high school, actually, she's one of those friends that like you can go 6 months without talking to her, and then out of the blue call her and you meet and have lunch and then talk about literally everything, and then you cannot talk to her again for 6 months. But like I know she's always there for me. And so going through high school with her, I think it was kind of one of those things where like she knew that I wasn't mad at her. She just knew that I needed space and that I needed time to like regroup myself. So I just really appreciate that, because her not getting irritated with me when I needed that space and her recognizing that I needed it really helped me ground myself and get back to what I needed.
Georgia, why don't you keep it on that end? We're gonna come up this way. So, and Brandon touched on this a little bit earlier. How would you describe how your disorder feels to someone who hasn't experienced it?
So I also mentioned this, I think, on the first question, but yeah, I personally, when I first started going through this, I just felt completely worthless, like an absolute burden on everyone I talked to. Like I said, I like to isolate, so I just would isolate and not talk to anyone and not share how I was feeling. And it's not fun, especially when you're in the middle of one of those states, like depressive states. When you do ask for something, it just makes it like, I would ask a friend, like, can you go get this for me? And then I would just immediately feel like a horrible person for asking that of them. And so it's just, it really is one of the darkest places you can find yourself, because it's like, there's no point.
So I have heard people describe anxiety like this, to where it's that feeling when you're leaning on the back two legs of your chair and you almost tip back too far and your heart starts racing. That's exactly what anxiety feels like, but it feels like that all the time. And kind of what Brianna touched on earlier, it does come with a lot of very scary symptoms. That are really hard to deal with if you didn't know that anxiety caused them. You know, it can cause shortness of breath and heart palpitations, can make you feel like you're gonna faint, can make you super dizzy, dissociation, just very scary. And I would not wish it on my worst enemy.
I do think, I'm gonna interject here, it can also be different for other folks, right? Each disorder can manifest and feel different. I've had students say, I can't really describe it, I can just tell you I don't feel right. I know what right felt like, and I know that this doesn't feel like that. So know that these are their experiences, but it can manifest and feel differently for other folks as well. Let's talk about, let's say you've got a friend who knows what's going on with you. How do they show up for you in a way that's helpful to you, but also lets you know that they know that's not the only thing in your life, right? So that they don't lead with anxiety, high day, right? Having a lot of that going on. How do they show up for you in a way that supports you, but also lets you know that that's one piece of what's going on?
So this is how I treat my friends that I know are struggling, and how I prefer for my friends to treat me when they know that I'm having a hard time. You can still check up on people without saying, how's your anxiety? My preference is, I hope you're doing well. It's simple. You're still checking on them. You're still hanging out. You're not treating them differently, but you're letting them know, I know you've been having a hard time. Let me know if you need help. Yeah.
Something that meant a lot to me was when my friends knew I was dealing with anxiety, but they still took it upon themselves to invite me out or ask me to hang out or something, because like I mentioned earlier, it can be incredibly lonely to deal with a mental illness. And so feeling like your friends still want to be a part of your life, even though you're going through something hard, is it really helps with the process of dealing with mental illness.
Yeah, to bounce off of that, I think that she's very much right, that even if you know that, or if you think that your friend is gonna say no because they're going through something right now, just ask. Like, it's more about the ask than it is whatever you're doing. The other thing that I would say is ask them about specifics in their life, like ask them, oh, I know you had that test on this day, like, how did that go? How are you feeling about that? Or, oh, how's your family doing? Like, I talked to your mom, like, just like things like that, that aren't, about the whatever they're struggling with specifically, but other things in their life, so that that, they are still a whole person, a whole human with feelings that aren't just anxiety or depression or other things. Like, there's so much more to them, and the fact that you can acknowledge that means a lot.
All right, so for me, coming from like a family household that wasn't the best in the childhood, I like being at school because I like to be away from home. So I like to go to my volleyball games. I like to go to basketball practice. I like to go to the gym a lot. But when I came home, I didn't feel good about myself. I just wanted to leave again. So I think having a friend try to help me, I feel like they would usually ask me to go places, like, let's go to this after school, just to help me like get away and like just be more open and like feel better about myself. So just getting me out of the house is probably the best for me, obviously.
I know we've had 4 people, and I'm gonna echo all of that, but, the small gestures really do mean the most, especially when you have those feelings of just worthlessness. I know I've had friends that know that I'm isolating, and they will still leave a basket of ice cream, or like Ben and Jerry's from Walmart, or something on the front porch, and just knock on the door and leave. Like, that, when you're feeling worthless, something as small as that means the absolute most, because it means that they're still thinking about you. And definitely, I do want to second that, still asking you to go places, because they know that most of the time I probably won't go, but if they stopped asking, that would validate my feelings of I'm not worth it. So I think that is one of the best things that they can do, is just the small gestures, just keep asking, keep trying. I'll get through it eventually, and it'll be good.
Georgia, we're gonna start with you again. Is there an example you all can give me of what you would have considered at the time a mistake or a misstep that a family member or a friend made in terms of how they tried to reach out to you, how they tried to help, that maybe didn't work for you?
There were a couple times, that my friends did not know what I was going through. They were newer friends, so honestly, I can't blame them at all. It's one of those things, but I was isolating, and they tried to almost force me to go out. And it was just like, I don't suffer from a ton of anxiety, but I do have panic attacks fairly often-ish. And that almost sent me into a panic attack, just because they didn't get it, and they were trying to make me be more social, which I appreciated, but at the time, it was like, I physically cannot move right now. Like, all I want to do is lay in bed. I cannot will myself to get up. I'm sorry, I can't go. And I wish that they had respected that a little more. So I definitely think that just know your friends, and know what they want.
For me, I just wish my family would just talk to me. They never really talked to me. They'd ask me how the game went, but they didn't go to the game. So I'd have to tell them how I did. And with volleyball too. And they never really came to the games for me. And like sometimes they maybe just punish me for like coming home late after a basketball game. They'd say I was going out with a friend. I'm like, I wasn't though. So they would just make me stay home, but at the same time, it's like, why are you doing that? I feel like coming, I don't know. No. Sorry, guys.
I would say that, one time that I can recall, like, I felt like was a misstep was, that my friend's parents were, finally starting to get involved in their mental health and, the mental of my friend. And she, was having a very hard time, and, I knew that she needed professional help, but I don't think her parents had gotten to that realization yet. And I think that a lot of times for different generations, because mental health is so much more talked about within our generation, and it's something that we bring up often, and that is not always the case for older generations. It's a bit harder. It's something that they haven't quite, they don't know how to deal with, or don't know what the resources are as much as I feel like we do. And that is obviously not always the case. But what ended up happening was, my friend tried to tell them that she needed help, and the parents were just like, like, really, do you, like, really, is it that bad? Because you don't seem that bad. And they were not trying to invalidate her. They just didn't understand. And so I think that the lesson to be learned there is, if someone is coming to you with a struggle, believe them, like just listen to them. And if they say, I think that I need help, do everything in your power to get them that help. But yeah, that's what I would say.
I would say a mistake that a family member made is when I was going through therapy and I found out that medicine would probably be the best option for me. I had someone in my family, and I still love them, say like, oh, are you sure that that's the best option? Like there's so many other things you can do to de-stress, like you don't need medicine, but it was getting to the point where my anxiety was affecting my everyday life and I really couldn't function like I needed to with my schoolwork and job. And so at the time, medicine was the best option for me. And yeah, I just feel like there's too much stigma around being on medication for mental illness. And, a family member or friend really shouldn't put you down for needing medicine.
Okay, I just got done talking about how great my dad was for my anxiety. Let's talk about what he did incorrectly. So years after he and I first had the first conversation, I decided that I wanted to go to counseling, pretty regularly, regularly. And I told him that and asked him if he could take me because I was still in high school, so I needed my dad to take me because he needed to get me out of school. And that night he sat me down at the table and asked me if it was his fault that I was going to therapy. I'm a people pleaser. I really want my parents to be proud of me. That is a flaw, I think, but I really want my parents to be proud of me. And when he said it to me, it heightened my anxiety because in my brain that said, oh my goodness, he's disappointed that I'm in counseling. This is the worst day of my life. And so we had a beautiful talk after that, and then everything was
All right, we got 2 more questions in this section, and we're gonna wrap after this section, and we'll go to the next one. Let's do some words on this one, okay? What stereotypes about mental illness bother you the most? Brenna's like, I'm not gonna do just words. I'm doing paragraphs. Guys, come back to me.
So a stereotype that really bothers me about mental illness, and I've actually had some people say this to me, is when they call other people weak for needing to take mental health days. I feel like, everyone obviously experiences mental illness and just everything differently, and it's not really fair to judge someone based off of how they want to take care of their mental health. So yeah, definitely, I feel like mental health days are important and should be way more normalized.
Attention seeking. I think that a lot of people who don't understand or do not see the value in taking care of your mental health think that the people that are trying to do so are attention seeking, and there's simply so much more beyond the behaviors that they can't understand than what they see just up front.
So I've got 3. 2 of them are basically what you guys said. Lazy is a big one. I think for me in particular, I've definitely, like my dad, I love my dad, but he does not struggle with some of the things that my mom and I do. And at one point he asked me why I was being so lazy. I almost punched him in the face. You don't I just took that to heart immediately, and I was like, I'm not being lazy, like I can't do this. So I think that's a big one, is when people that don't struggle with these things call us lazy or weak or attention seeking or something like that. It's just have to try to walk in our shoes because they just don't understand.
Your words.
Oh, yeah,
All right.
I got a few words.
Brianna found her words.
She found her words. Mine's not really a word. But I think that the thing that bothers me most about what people think about mental health is when they think it's not that big of a deal. It is a big deal. Your mental health is just as important as your physical health. Yeah.
Brianna and I have talked about this, so I'm gonna say this out loud. We don't save appointments at the counseling center for just the really bad stuff, right? So if you're having a bad day, if you're having a difficult relationship, you've got a roommate who's a nightmare, those things can all impact your mental health. Okay, so it's not just the super bad, horrible, awful days. I think there's a child's book that says something to that effect. It's really terrible, awful, maybe meaningless. But I would say if you're struggling, I'm gonna echo what they have said. The way you get help and support is by letting us know that you're struggling. Since we're talking about recovery, share with us what you do now to cope and keep yourself healthy and active and enrolled in school and all those things while keeping the mental health struggles, family stressors in check.
Well, I will say counseling can benefit anyone. You don't have to have a mental disorder to go to counseling. I say this to everyone. I'll probably say it again tonight. My coping mechanisms, right now I'm in between counselors right now. But counseling is important to me. It's helped me like navigate through a lot of things that I didn't even know I had trouble with. Which is another benefit. I'll just keep talking about counseling. But I also do a lot of focused breathing. I love butterfly breathing, and if you want to know how to butterfly breathe, I would love to teach you.
So aside from therapy and medication, like I've already talked about, I try to exercise like minimum 3 days a week. And I also make sure I take time out of every day to just relax and kind of not think about my responsibilities, you know, whether that be walking my dog or watching a show I want to catch up on, or just something small that makes me forget about everything that I'm dealing with.
I would kind of echo with that. I would say that exercise has become like a very important part of keeping my mental health in check. And I would also say the thing that has helped me a lot, if not the most, is journaling and writing things down. As somebody that doesn't always have the words to say out loud, or doesn't feel like they're ready to share those things with people. Journaling has become a very, very important part of my mental health care.
For my mental health, I kind of touch on hers. Like exercising, I exercise like 6 hours of 7 days a week. I weightlift usually. I went to weightlifting meets when I was in high school, and there was like a good coping mechanism for me lifting those heavy weights. Just kind of felt like I was letting something out that's been inside me for so long. So pretty much exercising, just getting out, running a mile once a week is like really good. So I say exercise is the best thing for me.
And we really hit on exercising, and I'm just saying it. So, yeah, I am really big in exercising. I mean, I'm a kinesiology major, so it's kind of like, that's what I take classes for. So I'm very big into that. But I don't journal. I'm not artistic. I know you don't have to be artistic to journal, but I feel like I have to be, so I just don't. But when I start feeling myself sinking into a depressed episode, I go in the notes in my phone and I'll write down like reasons I'm happy I'm here. And it just kind of gets me to think about people that love me or reasons that like I am worth something. So I do that a lot, and if that doesn't work, then I just go lift heavy things like you said, and that helps a lot. But yes, I swam for 12 years. So the pool opens today. I don't know if you knew that. I'm a lifeguard, I guess. So I'm very excited. will be swimming all the time, so if you come to the pool, you'll probably be swimming, but yeah.
I have one more thing that I want to say.
Just as a little caveat to what we have said about exercise, as important as exercise is, and as great of a tool as it can be, a lot of times people that struggle with eating disorders or control habits can often become very fixated on exercising, and it becomes a very unhealthy form of coping. And so I think it's important to recognize when and how your coping mechanisms and the things that you do to keep your mental health in check, like what those motivations are. Because if exercising becomes this thing that you have to do in order to feel validated to eat or to go do your work or do things like that, then it might be time to take a step back and reevaluate and use something else.
Okay, so our first section is coming to a close on students in recovery. Any questions from the audience for our panel on this section? No pressure. Okay, I'm now going to give a little heads up. We're going to talk about survivors of suicide. I know that we've had some challenges this semester on campus, so I do want to let you know we're moving into the suicide portion. Erin, is there anything you want to cover before we jump into suicide, about our students in recovery, other things? Or you want to hold your PSA at the end?
Yeah, I'll just gather my thoughts.
Gather all the thoughts.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
leave the floor, please, kindly.
You will bring down the house with a closing. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about surviving suicide. Survivors of suicide often feel guilt about their loss. Have any of you felt guilt when you found out about a loved one or a friend's death? If so, how did you get to a space of forgiveness?
So just a little bit about my situation. I was about 13 or 14-ish, and it was my stepdad who committed suicide. So obviously I wasn't his biological child, but he took care of me like both of my other parents did, and I felt like I was his child. And so I felt guilty at first because I felt like as a child, as his kid, I should have been enough for him to not do something like that. And I would often think, well, why am I not enough for him to stay? And of course, as a kid, he probably would have never shared any of his feelings with me anyway. But he did have tons of friends and family who loved him, and he definitely would have had a really good support system. So I don't know, I just feel like that should have never been an option for him, and that also brings some guilt with it. But through some therapy, I realized that it was almost impossible for me to know that he was going to do something like that. You know, he didn't leave a note, he didn't tell anyone why. So yeah, I don't really even feel guilty anymore because I've just learned that it's not really my fault, you know. So
So I had a friend who attempted suicide, and very, very thankfully, it did not succeed. But with that, whenever they told me about it, whenever I found out, came a lot of why didn't I see it? Why, like, what could I have done different? A lot of guilt on my part of like, I should have been able to do something and I should have seen it before. And well, yes, of course, it's important to realize that there are warning signs in a lot of situations, and that to keep a lookout for your friends, but at the same time, you aren't always going to see them, and it's more important now that we have both been able to come away from that, and I've been able to talk about their experience and to take what they have told me about all the things that they went through and things that they were feeling and be able to apply it to my life now. And I think that that is the thought that gets me through a lot of the things of guilt.
So I work at a hospital, at Deaconess Hospital, and I'm a patient care tech, so you deal with like a lot of patients who not only physical illness, but a lot of like mental illness. And I'm not gonna say her. She was kind of my friend. We talked, she came in all the time, back and back. She was homeless. She was only like 22 years old. She came in and out of the hospital, and I'd always like sit there and watch her because you have to watch someone at 24 hours a day. So just for suicide precaution. So, and we would always talk about things, and she seemed fine every single time. She'd always act like she's fine. I always say how her day was going. And she recently killed herself last week with pills. So it's hard. Sometimes you just don't even see the signs until it happens, and that's just the end of it. So just really ask them serious questions and really like just talk to them more. And sometimes it's gonna be too late. So just try to have everyone you can have with them, even if you don't know them that well. It's good to just talk to them every single day and try to get the best out of it before it's too late.
I have not directly been impacted, but like Summer, I had a friend who attempted suicide. It did not succeed, but I have those same emotions of why didn't I see it, or I talk to her every single day. Why, like, where did, like, what did I miss? Like, what happened? Especially since I feel like I go some of these same things too. I thought in my head that like, I go through this too, I should see it. Like, I should recognize this because it's in me. And it's just one of those things where you just have to recognize that you're not a therapist. You don't know. Like, you can't know what they're thinking, and you can't force them to talk to you. And it's just one of those things you have to come to terms with, unfortunately.
So let's talk about some of the strategies that you all may have used to navigate the grief after someone dies by suicide.
So during my grieving process, I had some really intense anger and sadness, not just for everything going on in my life, but especially towards him. And I found that the best way for me to grieve was to express my emotions to their full extent. So, you know, crying when I needed to cry, no matter where I was or who I was with, and also trying to channel that anger in a healthy way. Like my therapist said, you can go in your driveway and throw rocks around if it'll help your anger, or exercising even. So yeah, those are just some things, and over time it slowly became bearable, so.
All right, so for me and that homeless girl who died last week, I wouldn't say I was grieving a lot, but I will say when someone does die or like anything like that, like a close family member, I think I don't really talk about things a lot. I'm very like closed person. Like I have a wall. I don't have to talk about anything like personal. So what I usually do, I usually just like listen to music usually. I think music helps a lot of people. So I listen to music in my room, but talking to people, I did used to go to a counselor, and I would talk to my therapist sometimes, or just your friends. I think that usually helps. So if you're not like very open, I'd say just listen to music. If you just want to be alone, or just go in your room, or like go in your car, throw rocks, like she said.
So I would also say, whenever I was in high school, we lost a member of the class above me to suicide. And then I know all of us here have recently mourned the loss of the 2 students of USI. And I think that, at least for me, the emotion that accompanies a lot of that is just extreme, like, loss of hope. Just being so utterly sad that these people felt so hopeless that they took their own life and that we lost members of our community. And I think that whenever it comes to things like that, especially being like members of the community, talking to the people that have experienced that loss with you was one of the best ways to get through it. You know, sharing in the memories of that person, not kicking it under the rug, talking about what our experiences are, how we're all feeling, things like that, I think are the best way to get through it together.
Yeah, I do think that a lot of times folks aren't really familiar with what grief looks like in college. Sometimes if you lose someone in high school or college, that's the first death you're associated with. And so a lot of times you're just told it's okay to feel what you feel. I'm a big fan of very loud, angry metal music from the 80s when I'm working through grief. It's a thing for me. If you catch me at the end of the lights and I've had a bad day, you'll notice because my hair gets bigger and bigger as I rock out. Another thing for me that I do, and this is maybe gonna sound strange, I scream really loud in my car. It gives me a lot of release, because if I can't go swim or lift weights or punch a punching bag, sometimes just screaming gets that initial, all of the things that I feel, anger, frustration, sadness, emptiness, it allows me to erupt that out. So that's something I do. That's certainly something I did when I lost a friend from high school and a friend from college. Both of them were also young gay men who were in suffocatingly conservative Kentucky counties, and I say that as a girl from Kentucky. The late 80s and early 90s were not like today, and so I think part of the thing that I also struggled with was, have I been a bad friend because I lost contact with them, right? So sometimes even if we're not immediately proximate to it, we can feel, oh gosh, maybe if I just showed up in a different way. So I wanted to share that. Is there a particular way that you honor or remember someone that you've lost to suicide?
So I will occasionally visit his headstone, and then also myself and his other family and friends will post. We've turned his Facebook into into like a memorial page for him, and so we'll always post on his birthday, and his anniversary with my mom, and then also his death date.
How do you deal with people who didn't want to acknowledge the loss or deal with it at all?
So I did not hold a grudge on anyone for the simple fact that that's what we all felt. You know, like I mentioned earlier, he didn't leave a note, he didn't tell anyone why. And so none of us really had closure. And it's very, you know, I can definitely understand why someone just couldn't acknowledge the fact that he was gone and just didn't really seem real.
Any questions about surviving a suicide attempt or completion for parents? Yeah, Jenna.
Is it traumatic for someone to ask you, how we're doing, or, like, so a friend of mine lost their father, is it traumatic to text and say, hey, how you doing, how to reach your parents?
Yeah, for the folks online, the question is it a triggering or traumatic position to be in if someone asks, how are you doing since your stepdad died?
For me, it is no longer a trigger. He died in 2015, so it's been about 5-6-ish years. It doesn't bother me at all now. It used to kind of make me more sad, but now on those sad days, I just kind of turn it around and I tell myself, you can choose to be happy on this day. And so I've really just found the light in the situation to where things like that no longer bother me.
But like in the early years.
In the early
before you got
years.
to the point, like, if I knew your father's birthday and I said something like, that's.
Yeah, that was, it was sad in the aspect that, it made you think about it again, but it was also nice because you knew that someone was thinking about you. Because some people, they hear about the death and then they're just like, whatever, but someone who checks up on you, that's really special. It does make you feel better even when it's a sad situation.
Chloe, how have your workmates been? Have they checked in on you to see how you're doing? Are you all checking in on each other?
Can you repeat that? Sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to know how your work, I mean, this happened while you were at work, so are you all check on each other after something like that happens at the hospital? Or is there a protocol that you are encouraged to follow?
Yeah, we usually all get in a huddle and talk about it, kind of like before a shift or when shift change starts. But I think I usually do night shifts, so we would go at 6:30. So I came in at 6 p.m. then, and we all like just stood by her room that she was always in, and then we just like talked about it, and then we went inside the room and we put like flowers in there, just an honor. And she always liked peanut butter and crackers, so we would sit there and eat peanut butter and crackers, and she liked to always drink lemonade, so we just do that just to honor her, because we didn't really know her past life. She was homeless 22-year-old. We didn't really know much about her, and she actually got raped when she was 10 years old, so we could kind of like just to honor her, because she was in a bad shape. So we just talked about it. I was twice a week to go. Yeah.
All right. We're gonna move into supporters of people who struggle. What symptoms did you first notice that signaled maybe something was off with a family or friend? Family member or friend?
So this is if someone else is experiencing it and we're looking in on them. Okay. So like I said earlier, my mom and grandmother both struggle with depression and anxiety. Over the summer, actually, my mom went through a depressive phase. It lasted about a week. I shadowed her at work one day. She works with a nutritionist. So I shadowed her at work and we were driving home and she just like had a complete breakdown in the car. And I was like, this is not normal. Like I have what's wrong? Like you were fine all day and then you just completely shut down. And she got home that night. We got home. We kind of talked about it and it was just, I don't know what happened. Like she just kept telling me, she was like, Jordan, I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy. And I was like, I know, like, I believe you, it's okay. And she got home that night and went to bed and was in her room for the next 7 days. Didn't come out. We would take her food. She's fine. She came out of it. She's good. We're all good now. But I think it's just that initial, it shocks you because I think we try to look at others, but we're so wrapped up in ourselves and like what we're going through that I don't think we notice what other people are going through. And especially when it's someone that close to you, that initial just first breakdown that she had, I will never forget that because I didn't notice it at all. Like she just hit it so well. So I think yeah.
I would say the first signs that I noticed with a friend who was struggling with anxiety and depression at the time was the way that she held herself changed, which is a very small thing for people to notice, and I think that I only did because I was so close to her. But she seemed to crumple in on herself almost. And so just the way that she held herself just looked so off. And then the other thing that I would notice is that she pulled back, like she just got a lot quieter, wouldn't speak as much, and just kind of shut down and didn't didn't want to be, didn't want to have herself hurt, I guess. And, you know, talking about this with her later, she said that she couldn't be alone at that point in time. So it was easier for her to just like sit in a room with people and kind of fold in on herself than it was to sit in a room by herself and completely fall apart. But those are the first few things that I noticed.
Okay. How do you, if you're worried about someone, right, you've seen something, you think they're struggling, how would you encourage us to reach out to that friend, to express that you're concerned and let them know that you're someone they can talk to? How does that conversation start?
So I do want to mention that on the table out there, there are little like pamphlets that just say how to help a friend. Really good way. It's the way I'm going to tell you right now. It's just inside with a little more details. So Active Minds, the national program, has a method that I've tried to, I am still teaching myself to use. Because it takes a bit to get used to learn the wording that you should use. And I mean, you want to do it right. You want to make sure that they know you care without just boldly saying, I think something's going on. Because that could cause them to shut down, and that's the last thing you want to happen. So the message is just called VAR, it's just 3 letters, validate, appreciate, and refer. So validation is just exactly what you think it is. Like, it's okay for you to feel that way. And that's so nice to hear sometimes. And then appreciate is just, thank you for sharing that with me. Simple. Refer is the tricky one, because when I first heard it and I think refer, I think, oh my goodness, I need to take them to like CAPS, I need to take them to the student's office, and that's not always what that means. Because sometimes your friend is just having a hard day and they just need you to listen to them. So that can sound like, let me walk you over to CAPS. Or it can just be, what would help you the most right now? Because they can know what they need without it being immediately needing professional assistance.
I would say that one of the ways that I feel like is a hard but necessary way to approach a friend who you think is struggling, who has not approached you yet, like hasn't come to you and said, you know, I'm struggling with this thing. I would say that there's 2 ways. I would say you can reach out and say, you know, hey, I'm thinking of you. I hope you're doing well. It doesn't have to be a question. It doesn't have to be an inquiry. You can just be, I'm thinking of you. Like, I want you to know that you can talk to me if anything is going on. And then if that starts the conversation, great. And if it doesn't, maybe they're not ready for that yet. And the other thing that you can do is say, well, I would say that I use this only whenever I notice specific things happening with friends. Like I noticed that you seem a bit closed off the last couple of days. Like and I feel like those are really only comments that I can make with close friends. Those are not things that I would necessarily say to somebody that like I've just met, because sometimes saying those things can be hurtful, can be triggering, and especially if you don't know them that well. But saying, you know, I can see that you're struggling. I can see that, you know, you're not having a good time. Do you want to talk about anything? I'm here if you want to. And if not, like we can just sit here. Like we can just do something else, and just offering that support in any way that you can. But also acknowledging that not everybody's gonna respond to that the same way. Some people are gonna be able to open up and others are not, and that's okay as long as they know that you're there for them.
So this is a relative example. My sister, it is her freshman year of high school this year. So she just started and she, I have noticed, is starting to go through some of the same things that I went through. And so there's obviously a little bit of an age gap between us, so we haven't always been close. But obviously now that she's in high school and I'm in college, we're sort of like reforming that. And so the last like week before I came down to school this year, we got really close, like in a week. And like the night before I left, I wanted to ask her what was going on, but I didn't want to I didn't know how to say it. I just didn't know how to bring it up. And so I basically barged into her room with a bag of popcorn and chocolate, and we watched Harry Potter all night. And eventually I got up the courage and I was just like, how you been? Like, you know, like what's going on? Are you good? And so granted, that is a sisterly approach, so I don't know how well that would work with friends, but I just try to make light of the situation as much as you can without it coming off as it's such a touchy thing, and though I don't want to say anything.
Okay. So, let's say you've had that initial conversation, I'm gonna say validate, appreciate, refer again. That not only applies to mental health, you've got someone who has had a bad breakup and they've talked to you about it. If they were involved in a situation that maybe didn't have consent, that's a great methodology as well. You've had that initial point of contact, you've taken the steps to let them know that you're available. How do you find information about where they can go to get the help they need? I know Brianna's gonna be heavy on this one because, you know, whole table outside. But if you don't have a whole table of information outside, what's something like, what resources would you pull upon? If it was a friend here or a friend back home?
So here I have gotten myself recently involved in the CAPS program actually. So not super involved yet, but I think that would be a good reference point to maybe just start there to see just kind of what's going on. Before this, I never really got help though. So I will let Brianna answer the rest of this one. That is my segue though.
I would add that at least in the past, I would use Google a lot to find different resources and to find different just locations near me. And the other thing that I would do is ask people that I trust that are like my mom, who is part of the Deacon's health system. Like she would be the one to know like what resources were available and where to go and things. So anyone in your life that might have access to that knowledge more so than what you do, like don't be afraid to ask them.
Touching on what Georgia said, actually, I go to therapy through the CAPS program at USI, and it was actually, I recommend it to my friends who I know go to USI and who struggle, because it was a very simple process. You just go online and fill out a form and they contact you, and yeah, I think it's definitely a good resource for students.
Showtime. So, you all know that I have ample resources now. So if you need some, I got them. But at the end of every Active Minds meeting that we have, there's always, sometimes at the beginning, sometimes at the end, sometimes in the middle. But at every meeting, there is always a slide that tells you where you can go if you're having a hard time. And it includes hotlines, it includes CAPS, it includes the Dean of Students office. Because, a lot of people don't know DHM, and that's okay. But I take every opportunity I can to let them know that she's gonna listen to you if you need to. And that's important in a leader in a university. Your instructors, your advisor, hopefully your family, sometimes not always. But also I keep a little thing in my backpack all the time called a lifesavers manual, and it has all of those hotlines in it. So that I have them at my hands at all times in case someone needs to use them. Because not everybody's gonna wanna go into CAPS. Not everybody's gonna want me to walk them to the dean of students office, and that's okay. Sometimes calling a phone number is way easier than taking a walk to somewhere that you've never been before. That's why I think telehealth is so good. Because sitting in your room and being able to talk to somebody without leaving is enticing to people who don't want to leave their rooms.
I'm gonna let Aaron go a little bit more into what Counseling and Psychological Services offers. Dean of Students Office, we're located in the University Center East, Suite 1256. If you go to the Fireside Lounge and hang a right, we're in there. If you have not heard of a care report, you can always fill out a care report. That can be for a friend, for a classmate. We don't push a big red button when you fill that out. Someone from my staff sends an email and says, hey, we just want to check on you. If you're struggling or need some assistance, here are some resources that could be helpful. If you'd like to come and talk with one of us, please feel free to do that. We're not bounty hunters, but we try to do that introduction easily. A lot of folks also just walk in. So I did want to make sure that you knew that that was a resource available to you. I also want to thank Brianna for saying, go to your academic advisor, go to your faculty member. They're here to help you too. And if it's over their pay grade, right? If you tell them something and they're like, wow, I'm gonna validate that, I'm gonna appreciate that, and I have no idea what I would do if it happened to me. Because we have faculty members who tell us that sometimes the things that you all go through are way harder than the things that we went through in college. Thank God, yet again, social media did not exist when I was in college. I'm gonna go ahead and say it again. We've made it 100 times harder for you to be in college because of social media. Easy, at least 100, right? So if it's something that you're like, well, this isn't important enough. Are you sure? I go from meeting to meeting to meeting, and most of them, and I think I can get a backup on this. Most of them are really boring. Talking to you all is one of the best parts of our jobs. Yeah, I got time. I don't have to go to that boring meeting. Come on in. What you got going on? So I do want to echo that and make sure that you know that that's one of the reasons, one of the primary reasons this is my vocation. We're gonna close it out. Talk to me about how you maintain your own mental health when you are supporting a friend or a family member. Talk about the balance piece.
Or a university body. So that's something I've had a really hard time with lately because I do a lot of things. Lots of things. And I stretch myself too thin and I have a really bad habit of that, but I just love being involved. It's so fun to me and it helps me distract myself when I am having a hard time. But then in turn, then I'm stressed out because I have so many, like as soon as this is done, I have a meeting. It's a lot happening. So on Saturdays, I don't log onto my email. I don't get on my USI. I don't open my computer. And that's how I do it. Very rarely on Sundays, unless I procrastinated, which is a lot. And have an assignment that's due Sunday that I didn't finish. Again, that happens a lot. I don't do it on Sundays either. The weekend is for me, and Monday through Friday is for school and all of my commitments with that. That's what I tell everyone else to do too.
I would say that one thing that I, and I'm sure a lot of us struggle with, is creating boundaries. And that especially comes into play whenever you have friends and family that you love so dearly and you want to support them so much, but talking to them causes you more stress than what you are capable of dealing with. And to that, I would say it is so important for you to be able to step back and say, I love you, I support you, and I want to be here for you, but this is not a conversation that I can have right now. Here is a resource, here is someone else that you can go talk to, and I'm so happy to come and talk to you about this again whenever I have the mental and emotional space to do so. And then you follow up with them whenever you can. But sometimes you do have to step back and say, I can't be the one to do this right now, and that's okay. You don't have to be the one to do it every time, but make sure that they have someone. It just doesn't have to be you.
So I don't see like my family like all the time. I mean, I do live in one room, but I mean, he's always working and everything. But usually I just use social media to connect with everyone. I'll just be like, when I post something, I'll just be like, hey, how's it going? Like stuff like that, just to know I'm there usually. Or just to know I'm there, to send a random text. Usually to say, hey, how are you doing? I don't know. I usually just go through my phone and I just like text random people, like family members, just so I'm still there. Cause I haven't, sometimes I don't even talk to them for like 3 months or so. And I'm like, oh yeah, I need to talk to her. And I think it's her birthday today. That could be a lot of birthdays. I'm real bad about that. So I'll just say stuff like that. So I'm still there. I'm still in your life and I'm still here for you. So yeah, just like a little simple text kind of make me feel good. You guys send me a text, it makes me feel good.
I still have not found my balance, so I'm definitely open to tips. I can set no boundaries, and I am very bad at time management. So,
That's what college is for.
okay, I was gonna say, those of you that can relate to that, yes, I understand that, because I'm horrible at all of the above.
Questions about how we support our friends or family members who are struggling? Okay. I'm gonna invite Aaron Pryor up from the Counseling Center to talk, Counseling and Psychological Services, CAPS, talk a little bit about services they offer.
All right, thank you guys. So I did make a couple quick notes. And in addition to working in counseling and psychological services, I also adjunct with the social work department here at USI. And my 221 class could tell you that 3 or 4 notes for me can go 3 hours. So I'll keep it to a tight, like 5 to 10 minutes just to hit the highlights. But this panel said so many great things. I just wanted to add a couple other quick notes to it in the same theme, and then kind of wrap us up by talking about some of the services that are available to you guys here at USI. So one of the things I was thinking about in this part 1, when we were talking about individuals in recovery, there was a great question in there about stigma and stereotypes. And one of the things that I also want to talk about in that realm is this idea of labeling, because a lot of individuals are scared to seek services for mental health because they're afraid of the label that may accompany that as well. Because although our society is much more willing to talk about mental health, there are still, as was mentioned earlier, a lot of individuals who are not willing to accept what that comes with. And so the labels themselves carry a great deal of stigma. And so while that is unfortunate, I will say this, and maybe it's a bit of a soapbox, having a label with mental health and having a diagnosed mental health disorder, there can be pros and there can be cons to that. On the pro side, sometimes it is a normalizing experience and people are like, oh my gosh, all these things make sense. Like, I'm starting to get answers to my questions by understanding this thing more. But a lot of times, like, the labeling exists for insurance companies and the medical world and trying to get those dollars billed. So there's some pros and there's some cons to it. But one of the things I also was thinking about was that a lot of times with mental disorders too, there is an impermanence to those that not everyone talks about. Sometimes you might go into like your primary care provider, and they may say, oh, you have mild depression, and then that becomes a part of your personality, and it's something that you hold on to, and then you just feel like you're gonna have depression your whole life. And so it becomes this thing that just eats at you, and it becomes this snowball that you deal with. And so, just in terms of an educational piece, a lot of the mental health disorders and illnesses that we talk about, they don't exist forever. They're a point in time labeled to help us understand, like, what are we working with and dealing with right now, so we know how best to work with this thing using the evidence-based practices that are out there. But this is not something that you're necessarily get to deal with forever, right? Depending on what that thing is for you. So I want you guys to kind of know that too, and hear from someone as a professional, if you don't hear from anyone else, that this is not necessarily something that has to be with you forever, right? There are ways to get anxieties and depression back to a normal level. We all struggle with anxiety and depression at different points in our life, but it doesn't have to be a defining characteristic. So I want to talk about that briefly, just when we were discussing kind of general mental health. And then we also talked about so many great things and talking about working with individuals who are feeling suicidal or are having suicidal ideations or who have attempted suicide. And a couple things I want to note here is, one, if the topic is uncomfortable for you, as it is for so many people, I encourage you to seek out any sort of community trainings that are offered that talk about the topic of suicide prevention and asking the question about suicidality, because it feels like one of those things that you never want that word to come out of your mouth. It like feels really hard to say, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that you're scared of what the answer might be, and so the question never gets asked, and that's really unfortunate, because if you ask the question, you're not going to suddenly put the idea into someone's head, right? That's a common myth in the work of suicide. So, but it's really important that if your gut is ever saying, "Oh my gosh, this person is going through so many things, I wonder if they've ever thought about suicide," well, your gut's usually leading you in the right direction. And if your gut's saying, "Maybe I should ask the question," then it's a good idea to try to ask that as directly as possible. And so, I encourage you to seek out any opportunities you can to learn how best to do that, so that we can kind of use the best language possible. But even if we don't have the right language, it's still important to ask the question and put yourself out there and to make yourself a known support to individuals. And if you're working with suicide, the number one thing that you can do that is most impactful is any time that you can find ways to introduce hope to the individual. If you can help show kind of a brighter future and know that the emotion that you're feeling, the experience that you're having right now at this point in time will not last forever, and you can show them and help to create that brighter future for them in their mind, that's going to help move us towards a brighter future. So if you take nothing else away from this, remember that hope is kind of the key. Anytime that we can introduce hope, that is the thing that we're going to keep leaning into. And another thing I want to quickly say before I talk about our services is that when you are talking to someone and you want to have a conversation about mental health or suicidality, and you're getting to that point where you want to ask questions, it is really common for us to want to pull away from that, again, like I said, because you get scared of the answer. And so we're talking about maybe a good or a not so good way to ask those kinds of things. Try to avoid asking closed-ended questions, especially ones that seem like you're pulling away from them. Like, I know you're going through a lot of stuff, but you're not thinking about suicide, are you? Or I know you're dealing with an awful lot of stuff, but I mean, things aren't that bad, are they? Because when you're doing that, you're really kind of shutting the door down. Like it's starting, it's coming from a good place. You're starting to open yourself up, but you're immediately shutting them down too. So you kind of have to ask in a way that you're staying vulnerable to the answers that you may receive, because you want to make sure that you're creating a safe space for that person to answer in a genuine way. And then, I think this VAR, this validate, appreciate, refer is an amazing acronym to think about, because at the very least, we're all capable of validation. We can all appreciate other people's feelings. And if you don't know where else to go, you don't have to be the professional. You don't have to get this person to the end result. You just have to help get them to the next best place for them. So, and so with that, I just want to quickly talk about some of our services. So I'm the assistant director of our counseling and psychological services here at USI. If you're not familiar with our services, it is a free service for all of the students who are here at USI, whether you are an undergraduate student, whether you're a graduate student, if you're on campus, off campus, if you're a commuter. Our services are available to you as long as you're enrolled in classes, you are eligible for services at CAPS. Some of our biggest bread and butter pieces are the individual counseling. We meet with a lot of students in one-on-one therapy sessions. On average, we're working, we'll offer on average about 12 sessions a year, but that is flexible based on individuals' needs. There is no additional cost. There is no insurance piece. We also have a lot of great groups, both processing groups and psychoeducational groups. So on the psychoeducational side, that's just kind of providing information, coping skills, those kinds of things. Then the processing groups is an opportunity for others who are struggling to come together and to support one another, to normalize feelings, to offer advice to one another, very much like the panel has done so this evening. We also offer couples counseling if both of the students are enrolled students. And we work with faculty, we do outreach programming. If anyone is interested in collaborating professionally, please seek us out. We're always interested in trying to find new ways to work to promote the wellness of our students and our campus. And we also have a couple other pieces as well. If you are interested in services, like I was mentioned earlier, the best way to get connected, we have an online form. You just go on and fill it out, indicate your interest, and we'll reach out to you. You can also come into the office and let us know. If you're needing to speak to someone immediately though, or you're nervous about making that final step into CAPS, we have a service online called Talk Now. It is a peer-supported live chat, and it is nationwide. And so you're talking to other college students around the country. And so it's a place for you to talk in a safe space with other individuals who may be struggling as well. And then we are kind of in the final stages right now of partnering with a third-party program that is looking to expand our services as well. We offer telehealth within CAPS, but we are currently bound by our licensure in terms of who we can serve, Indiana, Kentucky students, and the company that we'll be working with will be expanding that footprint to be able to serve USI students no matter where they're at in the country at any given time. So those details will be coming in the coming weeks, so please watch for that. But just know there are a lot of services here on campus. There are a lot of supports here. CAPS is not the only answer. Dean of Students is amazing. Your faculty, all the administrative staff, they've all been trained to some extent to prepare a safe space for you to approach and to open up about some of those struggles and to get you to the next best place. So that is all I have, unless.
One last announcement.
Yeah.
So I want to thank this panel and for all of you who showed up today in person and also virtually. The next event in this series is a webinar on October 27th at noon, open to all USI. This event is organized by the Center for Social Justice Education and will focus on the importance of access to mental health services and highlight potential signs of student distress. Faculty and staff should be aware of and the campus resources available to address these issues. So again, thank all of you, Dean Hammond, Aaron, panel, you did a great job.